I'm Sal Marino, host of the One Poor Problems podcast. Today, very excited for this episode. We're going to be talking all about AI and how you can unleash that in your business. Our goal of today is to talk about how it can be implemented from a more strategic and business aspect rather than the nitty-gritty technical side of AI. And what's even more exciting is that I get to do that with one of my friends, Brian Montanari. He's the president and CEO of HABCO Industries. Brian, appreciate you coming on and taking the time to connect with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Sal. Hopefully I don't let you down.
Yeah, no way. No chance of that. You've already used AI to probably prep your conversation for today. So
yeah, exactly.
You'll be fine.
Exactly. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brian, if you don't mind,
Sure.
Get us started by just telling us a little about yourself, your background, and everything about HABCO.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Brian Montanari, president and CEO of HABCO Industries, which is an aerospace aftermarket manufacturing company. I'm a manufacturing person at heart. My entire career has been in manufacturing. Started off while I was in college working at the wire mold company driving fork trucks, which is one of the things I still love to do today. My team knows when I'm stressed out and they can't find me, I'm in the warehouse moving stuff around on a fork truck. But I've been at HABCO for 17 years. It's been quite a run. And we play in the aftermarket of the aerospace industry. So up until recently, none of our product flies. It was all used to maintain the aircraft or engine when it's in for service. We did launch a new part of our business last year, an MRO repair station, that we finally do have some parts that are on aircraft, on engine, that fly. But ultimately, we touch anything that flies from the aerospace industry. We are pretty well diversified between commercial and military, supporting both fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft, supporting both the engine and the airframe, and serving the OEM and the end user.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And so, Brian and the HABCO team have been a long-term partner of Charles IT. That's right. And getting to watch the journey and all that has been fun for me. And I've just gotten the chance to personally get to know you better. And for me, I've always been a fan of HABCO and the things that you're doing with technology. And I think less from the actual IT and infrastructure side of IT. That's the least sexy part of it. Yeah. It's really more geared towards some of the things that you're doing with, at first it was the augmented reality side and now dabbling into the AI. So you're definitely fighting the status quo of what manufacturing and traditional manufacturing does with, you think the old CNC machines and that kind of stuff. And, what's been the driving factor behind that philosophy of, utilizing some of these emerging technologies?
Yeah, good question. I think it goes back to my fundamentals and the roots from the old days back at the wire mold company, where everything we did was with the focus on continuous improvement, on a focus on lean. And my entire career since wire mold coming through to HABCO has been focused on that, growing through continuous improvement, growing through value add versus non-value added assessments. How do we make sure we're investing in our people? How do we make sure we put the people first culture? And ultimately this, from whether it was the augmented reality stuff that we did or some of the things that we're trying to do now from a business process automation or AI standpoint, it's still about process improvement. Mm-hmm. How do we do things smarter? How do we do things with more efficiency so that we can spend more time on value-added activities as opposed to non-value-added activities? Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of in that sense where anything that's out there that can help us get better, I want to touch it. I want to try it. Yep. And whether I do it myself without telling any of my team members or whether it's something we try to do at work, mm-hmm. it's all about networking. It's all about hearing what other people are doing. Yep. Listening to what's out there and finding a way to get it implemented and for the benefit of our business and for the benefit of our employees.
Interesting. So networking, I believe we tie this back to the one poor part of this conversation. I believe that the drink that you have here today is specifically tied to networking and the story behind that.
Yeah, that's true.
So tell me about the drink that we had and let's pour it and
sounds
let's
good.
share that.
Pour it as I talk.
Go for it.
So I like to have some drinks from time to time.
Yeah.
And, I'm not necessarily always partial to one type of drink. This started with one of the dinners that you and Foster hosted for some of your clients and just some folks and some friends within your industry. And one of the dinners was, there was a bunch of different alcohols, a bunch of different bourbons out there, and maybe I got to give a shout out to Bryson.
Yeah.
Boss Hog one day.
He did.
I had no idea what that was. Tried the Boss Hog and really liked it. But then it wasn't until later that year we went up to Vermont. My uncle has a place in Vermont. We like to go spend weekends up there, and found out there was a Whistlepig tasting room up in Quechee, Vermont. And I went in there for a tasting and came out with multiple bottles of different ones. And this 15 year is by far my favorite of them. It's a great drink. It's a smooth drink. And sometimes I'm in a bourbon mood. Sometimes it's a tequila mood. Sometimes it's a wine mood. So I'm not only focused on one.
Not partial to one.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
So we doing it?
Yep. And I learned this one from you.
Yes, you got to look in the eyes.
Look right in the eyes. Yep. That's perfect. Love it.
Yeah, every new pour, every new drink, I have to do a cheers and look in the eyes.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And some of you know why you look in the eyes. You can figure that out after.
That's awesome. So, again, our goal, again, is to talk a little bit more about how do we think about AI, right? From, our side, we're on the technical side, and we're like, you should be using it. But in all the other businesses, that tech is not their, like, primary focus, right? Like, what was the true impetus of that? And so, you said that you were a lean guy and looking for process improvement. What actually made you dive into like the augmented reality world and utilizing that? And how did you actually utilize that?
Yeah, certainly. And you're right. It's a progression. It's not like I woke up one day and said, all right, AI, this is what we're doing with it.
Yeah.
It actually started from a process improvement standpoint, from an augmented reality partnership that we were doing with CCAT. Shout out to Ron Angelo and his team there with Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. So I mentioned earlier that we're in the aftermarket of the aerospace industry. It's really the unsexy part of the industry, some of the things that you mentioned earlier. But most of the work that we do is quantity one. And so going back to my lean days, going back to the wire mold days, and my HID days where it was high volume, low mix, you can implement lean throughout a process like that and get huge results and continuous improvement, continually do it. But how do you implement that when you do a quantity one? You're not, your entire world is single piece flow. And by the time you implement a process improvement on it, the project's gone and you may never build that again. And so, just to give you a little bit of a scope, in 2023, 82% of all of our orders were quantity one. 96% of all of our orders were quantity 5 and below. And so when we live in a world that's like that, you start to look at things a little bit differently. You're looking at on-time starts. You're looking at how do I kind of push, where most times it's pulling through, how do I push through more efficiently, and how do I reduce that non-value added activity? But one of the problems that we had was when we got an opportunity to quote something with volume, we still looked at it in a mentality of one-off. And we didn't look at it from a costing standpoint and a pricing standpoint and an efficiency standpoint for that. And for that reason, we become somewhat less competitive than some of our competitors. And then you exacerbate that by living in Connecticut, where the cost of living in Connecticut and running businesses in Connecticut is a little bit higher. So we had an opportunity with Sikorsky for a quantity 51. Which a lot of other companies will look at, say 51. That's nothing. That's a small order. But for us, that's something we celebrate. We jump up and down for joy. But it's also something that could be detrimental, because if we don't do it right, that's a big sunk cost that you can lose on. And so we priced this one a little bit differently. We did it with the mentality of where do we think we need to be, as opposed to what would it take us to do it in the old lens. And we kind of looked at it and did a little bit of a time study ahead of time on what are the longest cycle times. And so just to give you an idea what the product is, it's a container that a part of the engine for a Sikorsky helicopter would go into, just used for transportation and storage and protection. And so we looked at it and said, all right, the two longest cycle times were the welding and then the stencils, because this 3-foot diameter container has all these stencils, and it would take quite a bit of time to put the stencils on. And on top of that, the individuals that would put the stencil on would need to know how to read a blueprint and measure, and there's a whole aspect to it before you even lay the paint on it for a stencil. So we partnered with CCAT and we said, all right, there's these two elements that are just too long, and if we can reduce the cycle time, then we can be more competitive from a costing standpoint. And they came back with some opportunities on the welding side, but to go in and invest in automated welding for only quantity 51, the ROI wasn't going to be there for us. So
Yeah.
we decided to really go all in on how do we reduce the cycle time on the stenciling. And so one of the opportunities was to look at augmented reality, where we implemented with a bunch of iterations, but it was fantastic. It's where the assembler could put on a pair of the Microsoft HoloLens glasses, and then the software that we partnered with SphereGen, Ted Dinsmore and his team, where the software would show in the glasses where you put the stencil. And so now, instead of having to have a blueprint, measure out, find your data point, measure, put it on, is it straight, is it not straight?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, let me take it off, let me put it back on. Now in the glasses, you visually see, and it's a simple go, no go. Place the stencil.
That's
place
cool.
the stencil. Place the stencil. And it went from being a 3-hour cycle time to being a 30-minute cycle time.
Wow.
Which was huge improvement. And what was really neat about it was it wasn't perfect. You couldn't 100% rely on it. You still had to take a step back and say, that looks crooked, and take a look at it.
Yep.
But it really expedited the process. It also reduced the skill level required. One of the goals I gave the team was I wanted either of my 2 teenage daughters to be able to stencil a container, and they don't know how to read a blueprint, embarrassingly, right? They don't know how to, they can measure somewhat, but and so doing that. But what really struck me when we did it was not just the cycle time reduction. It was everybody else stopping in the area, watching.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Can I try? Can I try? Can I try? And so that's really what started to start us going a little bit deeper down the path from a technology implementation standpoint. And we looked at it for, again, the cycle time reduction, but also I mentioned, being here in the state of Connecticut, which is a state that I love and I'm actively involved in it. It is a challenge. When you look at the industries that we're in and that we serve and in the areas that we are, there's a lot of growing companies. Some of our competitors and some of our customers are also our competitors from a labor standpoint. And so as our business is growing, we're blessed to be coming out of COVID in a much stronger position than we went in. And the growth is good. But if we can't grow with the demand, it's very quick to retract and lose our customers. We're not guaranteed anything. We're not on contracts for the next 20 years where they're guaranteed. We live and die by the performance that we have. So not only do we look at it for reducing the skill level required, we also looked at it from how do I reduce the number of non-value added activities that people do on a daily basis? Because if I can take a lot of the mundane data tasks and automate that, that means the individuals I have can be more productive on things that the customer is willing to pay for and on things that allow us to grow, so that I can grow significantly from a revenue and customer outreach standpoint without having to grow at that same level from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're seeing that in a lot of areas because one of the biggest topics right now is like retention and hiring of new team and all that, because although I do, there's debate whether or not like we're headed towards a recession or anything like that, but like especially the space that you're in, right? Like manufacturing is a necessity, especially in Connecticut, the things that we do. And so, finding top talent and being able to retain that top talent has been an issue for everybody.
Right.
So using some of these strategies, it sounds like is a way for you to either be able to not need to hire as many of that top talent.
Yep.
But also B, which I think is the cooler part, is you can take away the things that they're like, I don't like about my job, right? Like I don't like doing this boring stuff anymore. I don't want to do this. And you can, now it's like highest and best use, right, of the time.
Right.
So that's really cool that you've been implementing in that way. So how did you just get like started into that? Because what sounds crazy to me is that like you're in the manufacturing space talking about, putting these stencils on, and again, you're in that lens, and this is what's cool because, and in your role as the president and CEO, like you got to deliver the vision and make sure that everyone can kind of buy into that. So how did you go from saying like, there's got to be a better way to do this, to then partnering with CCAT and Ted and his team and figuring out like, you know what, we're going to use augmented reality to be able to do that. Like it's just a really cool concept that I don't think a lot of people in the manufacturing space take advantage of right now.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things to go off from that. And one of the points you just mentioned was from the retention side of employees, because when you look at the growth of companies and you look at the hiring need, sometimes you got to look introspectively to say, okay, well, how many of our employees are we replacing versus are we adding new employees for growth? And if you're spending as much time replacing employees, your issue isn't hiring people, your issue is retaining people.
Yep.
And so we look at how do we improve our recruiting process, how do we improve our onboarding process, how do we improve our retention process. And we look at of course from a cultural standpoint in your surveys and things like that, but we really focus on culture change. And there's a process to culture change. It's structures, activities, behaviors, attitudes. So if we put the right structure in place, you get the right activities. If you get the right activities, you get the right behaviors. You get the right behaviors, you get the right attitudes, and that's when people stay.
Yep.
The days that people, myself included, are most frustrated are the day you go home and you don't feel like you accomplished anything, that you don't feel like you provided any value. So if you look at some of our team members, especially on the customer service and sales side, when we have an opportunity for a request for quote with 200 line items on it, albeit one quantity one each, I get excited. I see that as an opportunity, as another customer we can go and please.
Yep.
But I can hear the groans coming from that side of the building. Now I got to go enter 200 part numbers in the system. I got to go do research on 200 part numbers in the system to see what kind of history we have. Do we have the right revisions? Do we have any product in stock? Did we make it last time? Did we buy it? And it just creates that level of, now I'm not pleased with the work I'm doing, and that feeds into, are you happy and can you retain? And so that's a big piece of what we look at as well, is the quality of work that folks are doing, and do they feel fulfilled?
Yeah, got it. So I feel like that's potentially a double-edged sword, right? Because you're like, all right, I'll take away these things so you can focus on these higher and better use. But at the same time, like, what I'm seeing a lot of organizations in their reluctancy to actually implement any of these emerging technologies is like the fear of potentially losing my job or something like that.
Yeah.
How is that from a overall cultural standpoint in your organization? Like, how do you address that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I always look at the process improvements and the training and the skills that we do as things that should be transferable should somebody choose to leave, or should we choose to free up somebody's future for them. But we have to focus on the culture side of things, and if we have the right culture and have the right work attitudes, those skills that we're investing in are going to give us and our customers the benefit. Should they choose to leave, so be it. We've been fortunate enough. Our team has done a really nice job, especially coming out of the pandemic, and our voluntary turnover rate is super low. And knock on wood with that. But it's because we're doing all of those pieces together, and we're trying to combine the technology to the growth. And as long as folks are feeling that they're valued, creating value, and that from a concern of losing their job, as long as we're delivering on the front end of the business and creating more opportunities, there's work for everybody. And we're not looking at it from a headcount reduction standpoint whatsoever. Purely from efficiency and skill level reduction, so that the folks that we have could focus on things that they'd want to focus on. Yeah.
So from a cultural standpoint of that, like, what's the buy-in? Like, you're like, this is going to help you grow, this is going to make you more valuable. Like, where does that come into play? Like, how do you actually gain that buy-in?
Yeah. It's funny because I go back to all of my years of when I started doing lean implementations and lean training, and it's the same exact mentality now, whether it's with AI or technology. Everybody always likes it as long as you're doing it in somebody else's area. Oh, that's really cool, but try it over there first. And And that was initially, so we had some early adopters, especially with that gearbox project. But, because we don't have that many large projects to implement on the production floor, we had to go to the business side. And I will say that we don't have a lot of early adopters. We certainly have a few who are of the mindset, no, I'm not going to use AI. I don't trust it. I'm not going to use business process automation because, it's just easier. I've been doing it this way for a long time. It's just easier for me to do it. And so it started with, me, frankly, talking to Foster. What are some things that I can do? I will say that my wife, she's far smarter than me, far more successful than me, and she runs data analytics for personal insurance lines at Travelers, which includes AI. So you can imagine what some of our dinner conversations are like. But the big difference there was because she's far more successful. Her company's budget is also, and because her company's business is far more successful than ours is. Their budget is very different. So that her approach to AI is very different and Travelers' approach is very different than Brian and HABCO's approach. And so how do you scale it to your environment, and how do you try things? And it went from me doing some things with it on the personal side, just especially when ChatGPT first came out, can you make me a website that does A, B, and C? Oh, cool. Yeah, you can. Can you make me a business plan that I can make $1 million in the next 10 days? Oh, cool. You can. And it was like that silly play to then, oh, wait. Hey, I'm about to write this email. Or I'm about to put this thing together. Can I throw it into something to have it just recommended to be a bit more professional? And then you go from that playing to then the dabble and brag phase of I'm trying something. Oh, check this out. Look what I just did with that. To then for us, it was then the progression to, well, I can really apply that here. I can apply it here. And then start doing some elements of it. And then I started getting concerned because then we're starting looking at it. It's like a shotgun approach, and you've got all these disparate systems, and this person using this and trying it on this. And it wasn't holistic enough. To then we had to take a step back and say, okay, let's look at this from a philosophy standpoint. Let's look at it from a digital transformation and digitizing things to go into digital processes to then, putting that transformation. And there's a gentleman named Rippy Singh who I've known for years, and he's really kind of been on the forefront of some of this. And I was at an event at CCAT, and I was talking to him about it, and he invited me over to his innovation lab, and he's picking my brain, and a lot of things became much more clear for me in that conversation about looking at it more strategically as opposed to those small improvements. I still want to do those small improvements, but I would say that the first real start we did from a strategic standpoint was about this time last year. We as we're looking at our budgeting process, we do our ocean planning and we do our strategic plan. My executive team would go off site throughout the year to make sure we're always rolling our strategic plan. And then usually at this period of time, we go off site and focus on the next year. And then, so we did that last September, and then last October, November timeframe, we did a complete off site with the entire management team, not just the executive team. And we at the executive team had put not just AI, but business process automation, using technology as a strategy to get better. We put that in our strategic plan, and I rolled it out. We did our offsite at the casino at Foxwoods, and I had a whole section on AI, and it was amazing to me to find out how many people talked about AI, but I just never really tried it. And there was definitely a few people who used it for different things. So I did a little activity, a little exercise in the offsite, and I said, okay, sales team, if we're going to do a presentation to Pratt & Whitney, we want to present to them on why they should give us this contract or why we should do this. How are you going to go about and do it? What are you going to do? And you go back, let's take the old template we would use from Power, put it together. And I brought up one of the sites that I was familiar with using.
What's that?
That was gamma.app. And I just typed in, I am a salesperson at HABCO. Our customer is Pratt & Whitney, blah, blah, blah. We want to do more in this area. And just typed it in live during the event and said, build me a presentation. And then you could see it just turn, and then all of a sudden you got a presentation. Now, by no means was that presentation able to be sent to Pratt in the way it was. And that's kind of one of the things that we had to talk about is you can't just type things in and just trust it blindly. But at least it gave, I would say, at least a 70% start
Yep.
that just would save a tremendous amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it even had pictures of the engines that we were using in our mock scenario to use.
Yep.
And so that started opening up some people's minds as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think taking it from that first part of like, hey, here's at least how to use it, because I think you're talking about people that may be afraid to use it. They may just not comprehend how to use it, or they're just overall like just apprehensive to try something new because it's the way that I've always done
Correct.
it. Like going in and pushing them to have that experience and try to learn it, because I think it does exactly what you're saying. Like I remember we did a webinar early last year, and we had Kane, one of the partners from Aton Law, and he came on to talk about how he was using AI in his practice. And he was like, people are afraid. I think it's good though. And he's like, yes, we're spending less time answering like the mundane things. And he's like, and that's definitely impacting like revenue, right? Because you're not billing for these super simple things.
Right.
He's like, but it's like, man, the conversations we're having are so much more impactful, right? And they're just high level rather than having to, spend the time trying to explain certain things, because you can go and learn it.
Right.
So I love the philosophy of that. But I'm also curious to go one level back and address what you said, which I feel like might be one of the pitfalls, is the sprawl of the use of technology and AI tools. So at what point did you realize you're like, hey, I think we're using this in a bunch of different places? How do we make that more holistic, like you were saying?
Yeah. So when I mentioned moving from the, digitizing to the digital process to then the digital transformation, again, some of it was my vision associated to what I believe are the elements of the business that are just so time consuming. Mm-hmm. And it's really, so I started, really where it went was the front end of our business, that 200 line opportunity that now you have to go and spend all your time, data entry. Then you're looking at, all right, not only is it data entry, it's history, it's revision, it's, all the elements. If we made it, were we successful? Were we on time with it? Mm-hmm. Did we have any rework? And so we were kind of looking down a path with a few different companies, companies like Triple Helix, as well as, Ted's company was SphereGen, and looking at some others, and CCAT had recommended some. And I felt like we were going down this path that I know any single one of them would have been able to solve. Or I even talked to Foster about some of the systems you guys are using. But meanwhile, I'm also talking to folks in other elements of the business, whether it's supply chain or engineering, about other mm-hmm. things. And it was that conversation with Rippy that yep. really made me take that step back when he was talking about it. And he just made a simple comment about it. And it was simply around, our ERP system is Epicor. Mm-hmm. He said, have you ever looked to see what's on Epicor's roadmap? And I was like, holy cow. Yep. Well, why wasn't that the first thing we did?
Yeah.
Right? So we're sitting here because we're go. We're how do we get this implemented now? And then it's, okay, what are systems that are out there? And then to your, to the point you were talking about before, which, when you're looking at all these different systems, now I've got to look at it from a security standpoint. I've got to look at it from a training standpoint. We are a government contractor, CMMC compliant. We're working towards CMMC compliant. I think we're doing really nice in that area. Mm-hmm. We're on our GCC high tenant. There's a lot of restrictions with that, so it's not like we can just go and use any system out there. And that's really where it was some of the concern for some of my direct reports was, mm-hmm. How can we guarantee that somebody's not going to type in a Pratt part number or a Sikorsky part number and have information out there? Or how are we going to ensure that there's no way drawings or anybody can get in? And so we were being super careful on that standpoint, but I'm still trying, how do we get the benefit?
Yep.
And when Rippy said that, I was like, all right. So I came back and I talked to Kate, who was our VP of Finance, who's intimately involved in Epicor. I talked to Jeff Kretzmer, who's our Chief Technology Officer, and Laura Rappel, who is our Senior Director of all things Epicor. And sure enough, there is a tremendous amount of stuff, not just AI, but business process automation, mm-hmm. that's on their roadmap. So now we're going through an upgrade to the newest version of Epicor on cloud, protected and with the kinetic interface, and just something as simple as three-way matching. In your world, right?
Yeah.
The amount of time we spend manually doing that. And Kate and her team, I'd much rather Kate and her team being more strategic in the business from a financial standpoint than focusing on APAR. Right? So it's that piece. So now it's finally at a point where I'm like, okay, we've got that roadmap. We see what's in this new version of Epicor. We can see what's in Epicor's future. And if we can lock in on that, we already know it's a secure environment. We already know it's compliant with what we're trying to do. So I can remove some of the risks associated with that. I have to be a little bit more patient in some of these areas, but I'd rather be that. But now at least it's not Brian's crazy idea of going to use Gamma.app or OpenAI. It's, this is Epicor. It's tried and true. Everybody's been using Epicor for years. So if Epicor is implementing it, of course we should be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best pieces of advice that you could offer, right? It's find what is your what's your guiding light, what is that platform, what is that one thing that you use, and how can you then figure out how to double down on that? Because I think that you said it the best, because you're implementing AI solutions for process improvement, for redundancy, for needing less specialized and advanced level employees, all that different stuff. And then now adding a bunch of other AI tools on top of it just makes that even more complicated when you can instead try to tie it into the ecosystem that you're already working in.
Exactly.
And I think that is powerful, because that's one of the biggest pieces of it. So I think one of the other part is you talked about involving your technology team and your on the compliance side, where were the pieces that you got the assurance from whatever relationships that you have or advisors that said hey, it's okay to use this, or watch out for these different things? Because being a DoD contractor and having to worry about CMMC and all that stuff, I'm sure there's definitely some concerns there, and probably some people on the compliance side that are they're Brian's crazy. I don't know what he's doing with all this AI. It can't be used right now. How did you navigate that part of the process?
Yeah, and it goes back to the augmented reality project. I mean, that was paramount. There was no exceptions and no bending of the rules for it, because it's not our IP that we're touching. So that was paramount, and making sure that Ted and his team understood that. Charles IT was involved with that, and making sure that we were 100% compliant from an IP protection and from an ITAR standpoint, and just everything. And so once we went through that, and you realize that there is a path, it just might not be as quick, it might be a bit more cumbersome, but if we have those strong tenets and we're not willing to break from those, you can find a way. And I think that's another piece where going to the Epicor process and moving away from some of the disparate systems. Because you can Google today, and the number, you go in your app store, the number of AI apps out there. They're multiplying on a monthly basis. No idea where the source code is. You have no idea where the information is being stored. And that's just scary, especially in our regulated environment. And so I think taking a step back and stopping some of the processes we were going down has given internally some of those compliance concerners some more confidence that we're not going to put ourselves and our customers at risk.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're going through and utilizing a bunch of the different AI tools out there, right? And so maybe it was during the playing stage and just trying to learn. You mentioned one of the platforms that you're using. What are some of the other ones? Is there any names that come to mind that you're these are things that I used? Or
the few that we've used, that I would say are more on the fun side but usable. Obviously I talked about Gamma.app. That was a good one for some of the starting points for some presentations. OpenAI ChatGPT for some some basic things. I'll give you a good example. I was, last weekend I was struggling putting this formula together. I'm a factory person. I'm not, I'm not as smart in some of these other areas. And, it was a complicated Excel problem I was trying to put in place, something that my wife could just type super easily. And I was struggling with it, and it was like taking me way too many steps to do it. So I'm like, I'm trying to calculate this, and I just laid it out in ChatGPT, and in 10 seconds it gave me the steps to do, and that was a super helpful thing that I implemented right there. So it's
pretty cool.
It's doing the trial and error, knowing when you've hit your limit on trying to do it manually, because it's not always on the forefront of our minds to try to do things like that. And just playing and getting comfortable with it. I think sometimes it goes too far. I mean, my oldest daughter, she's a junior in college now, and she was searching hard this time last year for internships, and she's done a great job with it and had a great internship this past summer, has another one next summer, and she was really looking to have her first LinkedIn profile. And so she was all excited. She's like, "Dad, check out my LinkedIn profile." I looked at it, and her summary were words I've never heard come out of that child's mouth. I'm like, "Bri, great first step, but come on, you got to take that." And then she did, and she she was quick to fix it before she went live with it. But I'm all for that. Use that as a starting point. And it gets the brain flowing. It gets you 60%, 40%, 80% down the process, and then you just tweak it and make it yours.
And I love that. I love that. One, that's like very personal way to use it, and that's really cool because there's so many uses for it on a personal level. But you also mentioned a similar strategy that you asked your sales team to do at the offsite, and you were like, "Hey, put together this PowerPoint, can't send it." But like, guess what? 70% of the work has already been put in place, and and that I think is one of the most powerful parts of using AI. And so, that same thought process, is there any other parts of the business that you're encouraging AI to be used? Because on the manufacturing shop floor and that side of the business, like, makes a ton of sense, and I think there's a lot of cool things you can do in what your team's already doing. But for those that may not be specific to manufacturing, but most businesses have to have all of the other back end functions. What are some other things that you're encouraging them to do to utilize it?
So good question. I'm looking at it from two different levels right now. Again, still trying to find the right way to pull it all together, because if all you do is optimize one step of the process, all you're doing is creating a bottleneck at another step. So you got to find a way to pull it all the way through to tie that whole value stream there. But there are two areas that in particular we're looking at. We've grown our business tremendously, and not just from a revenue standpoint, the number of transactions that we're doing, especially as we've launched our new business, and that every time you're doing a transaction, that's also another payable and another receivable that you have to process, but multiple payables, right? And so, don't get mad at me when I say this, but finance and accounting is a non-value added operation from what's the customer willing to pay for, right? But it's a necessary non-value added operation, but those are the operations that you don't want to spend as much time doing. And certainly I don't want to be hiring 15 people to do payables and receivables. So that's a big piece that's going to be done within Epicor, and Kate's really going to be spearheading that. So how do we become more efficient in that process on that side of it, the back office? And on the front office, as you understand a little bit more about our business, and I know you know this, but we have product that we manufacture, and we have product that we procure, and we our decision and we also have product that we service and do all the things with from a calibration and from spare part. But when you look at the make buy decision, there's a lot of decision trees that go into it. Can we make it? Yes. Should we make it? Maybe. How do you know? Well, the last time we made it, we lost our shirt on, or the last time we made it was very efficient. That goes into it. Is it our IP? Do we have the ability to make it? Do we have the drawings from the OEM? If not, we have to go to the buy side. Do we have the capacity? And so when you look at that, if I've got this opportunity with this customer, that 200 line items, the vision is not only do I have to enter all that information in from a request for quote standpoint. Yep. But in order to estimate it, in order to cost it, all of those things have to go in play. And just because you can make it, and you have made it successfully in the past, doesn't mean you should make it now, because if you don't have the capacity in machining, and that's a key operation, and you can't get it into machining until 3 months from now, but the customer needs the product in 2 months, no, I can't make that. Yep. So it's looking at what Epicor has inherent in the front end process, and then looking at, from a bolt-on standpoint, how do we get that done automatically? Get it loaded in the system. What's the history? Did we make it? Did we buy it? If we're going to make it, when do we have it linked to our capacity planning module? Mm-hmm. You have the ability to get this through your bottleneck operation on this date, and then it goes through this. So your lead time should be 6 weeks or 4 weeks. The last time we bought it before, we bought it from 2 suppliers. Maybe supplier A was a 16-week lead time, supplier B was an 18-week lead time, but supplier A delivered it on time, supplier B didn't deliver it on time, they were 2 weeks late. And then once we received it in, they didn't have there was a DMR because they didn't have the right paperwork, or it was scratched and we had to buff out the scratch, so total cost of poor quality was added into it. And all of those are things that go into an element to make a decision on, should we make it or should we buy it? And if we're going to make it, what are we going to estimate for a cost? And if we're going to make it, what are we going to estimate for a lead time? Mm-hmm. In that process, times 200, and it's even more than that, because it's the items that you bought, you had 3 quotes, and you have to even look at, even if you didn't award it to supplier A, there was supplier C that had quoted 2 weeks longer lead time, but their history is 100% on time with 100% quality. Mm. Are they the supplier you should have chosen? And giving that feedback to the sales team from a pricing standpoint, giving that feedback to the estimating team and the supply chain team from who you're going to choose, mm-hmm. is all things that can be done through technology. Yeah. And so if I can do that, if we can do that in the front end, mm-hmm. then my sales team can spend more time, picking up the phone and calling a customer, as opposed to doing data entry. They can get their tails on a plane and go fly and see a customer, do business development.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So generally, as we kind of wind down mm-hmm. this conversation, and I love the topic, love your insight into it. And again, one of the main reasons I wanted you to talk to me about this is just your experience in it, and especially in the space that you're doing it. I love that it started to make its way across your business. So I guess as we kind of wrap up, if you were to say, like, what is some advice that you'd give to, a business leader that is thinking about adopting any of these emerging technologies, whether it's like augmented reality, whether it's AI, any of these type of things, like, what would be some advice that you would give somebody as like their starting point?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, whether it's, to your point, whether it's technology-based, product-based, or lean-based. Yeah. It's open-minded, failing fast, mm-hmm. but at the same time, making sure you never compromise your ethics or your top tenants, because even if you're in a regulated industry, whether you want to be, whether you like some of the bureaucracy or like some of the requirements, at the end mm-hmm. of the day, you have to comply with it. So never break those tenets, never break the ethical side of it, and keep mm-hmm. the protection there, but be open-minded and continue to push. I mean, I have to continue to remind folks, hey, did you try typing that in? Did you try doing that? And once you get those adopters, and once you start to get some wins, and then it starts to roll, then it becomes powerful. We're not there yet. We're still, I would say, at extreme infancy of this, mm-hmm. but I think folks are starting to see where it can be a benefit.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So last part of kind of what we do here,
yep.
We make you have a couple drinks and hang out.
Well, a couple. I'm selling my first.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So maybe you'll have the advantage going into this part. But mm-hmm. We also basically have you do a typing test at the end of this. So we have you go through. Everyone that comes on does this test, and the scores will be ranked after every episode, but we won't know until the next one to make sure that they stay tuned to see what your score was and where you ranked. the end, we're going to hope that AI could have typed this. Let's crack the code this
I
morning.
know, I feel like it's really fast.
We got a few mess ups, but